Thanks, Joel. Hey, everybody. I'm Alan.
And I'm Brent.
Welcome to our presentation at the online testing conference, where we will talk about 10 reasons you may think modern testing won't work for you and why you're wrong. And I won't ask for a show of hands because I cannot see you, but I'm going to guess that at least a few of you have heard of the modern testing principles, but probably a lot of you have not. And the head nods are with me. Good. We're good to go. Brent, have you heard of them?
I have multiple times.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Brent and I have a podcast together called A/B Testing. You can just search for A/B Testing in your podcast app, or you can go to angryweasel.com, whack A/B Testing, and get the RSS feed. That's our plug for the day. And before we can start with the myths and the arguments and the fun and the controversy, we need to set some context of where this thing modern testing came from. And for those of you that have not heard of this thing Brent and I have been talking about for a few years now, this will help, because what you'll find is that modern testing isn't that modern and it's not that much about testing. So it was originally about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, somewhere back there, where we began to use the term modern testing, not because we were trying to coin a brand new word or a brand new phrase. That happens too much in the testing world already. But we were talking about traditional testing. And by traditional, we mean a siloed test team, or maybe they don't even get to talk to the dev team, where code is thrown over the wall to the testers and the testers are responsible for testing quality in, which is a world that Brent and I both spent at least a little bit of our early careers in, and it's no fun. And we saw change happening. And as we started talking about what this change meant to both individuals and teams, to contrast that traditional old style testing, we began using the term modern testing, and then it kind of stuck. Along the way, I was reading Ray Dalio's Principles, which is a very good book, and I was thinking, we've been talking about this for so much. We should write some principles that describe what it is we mean by modern testing, what drives what we think this new world of software quality is. And so we wrote the modern testing principles. I looked at the first draft we wrote, and they were okay, but kind of bad. We vetted and iterated a lot with our community of listeners. And about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, we wrote what we called version 2. And we thought they would keep on iterating, but they've stayed exactly the same since then. So they've started to stand the test of time. We're not close to changing them in the future, but we feel pretty good about them. I introduced them for the very first time at a conference just over a year ago. And then ever since then, most of our podcasts, and we release about 2 podcasts a month, have been in some way talking about what these principles mean, what we mean by modern testing. So I'll show the principles on the next slide, but that's sort of the history of how we got here. And if you think this slide was a wall of text, this slide will make you hate us. You can read these at moderntesting.org, and I believe Chris Kent already posted these in the Slack channel. And I'm not going to read through every single one of these. You can now or on your own. Some are head nodders. Yeah, of course. Some you're looking at and you're saying, Brent and Alan, WTF. And that's fine. We did not create these on purpose to be controversial, any of them. We do truly believe in everyone, and these principles drive the way we work. Me in my current program role and Brent in his data science role, we strongly believe these principles are what drives creating high quality software that customers love. A few points of controversy, and we'll refer, rather than go through these one by one and explain what each one is, I think Brent and I, who are going to split up these myths, I think we'll both refer back to these in our discussion. And then if you want to take a note of these or go to moderntesting.org and ask questions about them at the end, we are planning to, but if you've heard our podcast, you know we have tangents, so no promises, but we are planning to have plenty of time left for questions at the end. But that's sort of the story of modern testing. And that leads us to today, where modern testing is starting to become a thing that's talked about by more than Brent and I, and which means that there are some places people go, yeah, I get what you're trying to do, but that won't work, or that will never work, or you guys are freaking crazy. And in fact, one last story and we'll move on. And Brent, I'm sure if I could see him, he's saying, Alan, get there. Come on, come on, come on. Just this week on Twitter, at Alan Page, I had a couple different tweets where basically I was speaking to one of the modern testing principles, directly or indirectly, it doesn't matter. And half of the replies were, yeah, of course, duh, why even bother saying this? And half the replies were, you are completely crazy, this is idiotic. And I think that's a good place to be. I many times said, when I speak at conferences, if I'm not making at least a few people mad, I'm probably not talking about the right subjects. So with that great intro, we have 10 things that we've heard over the year-ish of talking about modern testing.
Over the months.
What?
Over the months.
Over the many, many months of our modern testing journey, there are some things we've heard that we would like to address as potential myths, falsehoods, or outright lies. So I'm going to leave the next one to Brent. But first of all, I did want to mention that all these things tie to what modern testing came out of was this statement that Brent made years ago, which is accelerate the achievement of shippable quality. And over time, we've adopted that as the modern testing mission. So all these principles support this. And this is very much, if you've read Lean Startup or books of that ilk, you'll see we've stolen a lot from there. So with that now, let's get on to the myths. Brent, you're up with this one. Tell me about this.
So one of the first myths that we hear, and I don't know if I want to call them myths, but one of the common statements we hear is, hey, we need QA to focus on bugs or automation or sign off and not focus on improving the business. Or we hear a variant where focusing on bugs, automation, and signing off is in fact already improving the business. So first off, that last bit is not necessarily true, but let's deal with it as it's written. Okay. One thing I would like you all to do is Google the following phrase: the age of the customer. There you will see a lot of discussion, and this is a term that was coined a couple of years ago, but I think it very correctly defines where we are in the software world. We have so much stuff online. A customer can do, well, let me phrase it a different way. In the past, in traditional world, on-prem, customers had to go to sailors to get information. This is no longer the case. Not only can customers get pretty much anything they want to know about anything online, they can try it out. And this has given customers significantly more power than ever before. In addition, the world's changed. We have technologies out that are common, like AI, open source, the cloud, big data. These make it easy for the competitors to win. Now, there was a study that came out about 2017, and one of the things it was specifically targeting was test. And one of the final comments it did in a closing is it made a statement that test is at risk of being an impediment to change rather than its purveyor. Meaning Test hasn't kept up with the current business requirements around adaptability and the competitive landscape. Now, so Alan and I, we believe this is not the correct direction. Tests has been very, I'll just say, defensive as a discipline for a while. A lot of people talk about, heck, I've been in the industry for nearly 3 decades now, and I still hear us talking about how do we move quality upstream? How do we get dev to, design for testability? What we are trying to suggest is that the old approaches that got us here aren't going to help businesses thrive and help us get us there in the current age of the customer. There was another study that came out very recently, and I've probably quoted it multiple times. Alan's already mentioned Lean Startup. If you do not have the book Accelerate by Nicole Forsgren, please right now go to Amazon and get that shipped to your house. Yeah. One of the studies that came out of this, so there is a team of researchers that has specifically looked at the DevOps culture. And they came out with a study that's very fascinating, and that is they've shown that dev focusing on automation is proven to be correlated with business performance. But they were not able to show any evidence of QA owning these things being correlated with business performance. Now, so we think what needs to be done here is that QA needs to make a shift, and they need to directly tie their effort to what the business cares about. That is going to help QA thrive in this new world order. I'm done with that one, Alan.
Excellent.
Yeah, we don't have a good.
No, that's good. That's good. I'm about to post a picture of me holding up the copy of Accelerate that's sitting on my desk in front of me with a bookmark in it. It's one of the books that I bought a hard copy of and also have a digital copy of, so I can read it anywhere. It's a good read and a valuable resource.
I'm having a hard time reading it myself because literally every 2 paragraphs I'm highlighting something and I'm taking notes. Yeah.
Moving on.
All right.
Here's something I've heard, maybe even yesterday. If everyone is testing, if the whole team owns quality, that's going to slow us down, not speed us up. Our developers need to focus on getting features done. We're there to do their testing for them, et cetera, et cetera. This, I'm going to steal a phrase that Brent has stolen but uses all the time. Do you know what you call a fully utilized freeway? It's a parking lot. What Brent and I think is important for delivering customer value is flow. We can't confuse efficiency with speed. It's about getting stuff to customers quickly. Getting high value software to customers quickly. There are multiple studies already that show that improving code correctness from the start will speed up your development cycles. Theory of constraints, the goal, the book, Phoenix Project. It's plenty and plenty of writing from those business novels to a lot of things about Lean that show that slowing things down and getting stuff right makes your overall velocity much, much quicker. And it's maybe hard at first to make that change. And Brent, if you're going to type, man, you have to mute first. So it's just not true. It's hard to make that move to get everyone to own quality. And Lisa had to drop out, and Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory wrote the absolutely wonderful books on agile testing. And fully they endorse it. It means the whole team owns quality, and the teams they work on, the whole team does own quality. And modern testing builds a lot on agile testing. But what I've seen in practice, it's a lot of teams practicing agile. They read that book, but then they still have the tester on the team do all or most of the testing work. But they do really fast cycles and they do it agile, so they call it agile testing. You will be faster and you will deliver better software if the whole team truly owns quality. When I manage testers at Unity, in fact, it's all those testers are still there. I moved them into dev teams. They do hardly any testing, but they are there to make sure that the whole team does testing. They're testing coaches, and that is a much quicker, much better way to make software. This idea that cranking out features as fast as you can is the way to deliver customer value is short-sighted and dangerous. We want to deliver customer value, and we can't test quality into the product. And then another, I don't have this line in front of me, but something else from Accelerate, which I will mention again today, is they've discovered through research that having developers own testing and all of the automated testing improves testability, and improving testability improves quality across the product. So it's if you're only worried about getting broken software to customers quickly, then yeah, I think everyone testing would slow you down. But if you're worried about getting quality software to your customers at a frequent pace, the whole team has to own quality. I stand by this, and I think, as written, number 2, the statement which I've heard is a myth.
Yeah, I will say, go back to statement 2. So I will say that I've experienced the same thing. Move back to 2, Alan. Alan, yeah. I've heard the same comment. And I will say that it is absolutely true that in the short term it does. Because dev, again, is used to throwing things over the wall. But what we've seen from the studies and we've seen from experience. Joel didn't mention this, but I've spent most of my career as a test manager. About 10 years ago, I shifted over to dev, and I didn't have a test team, but I did have about 50% of my developers who came from test. And what you see over time is that when those individuals are owning code correctness, what you see is that testability gets baked in. And this improves your ability to not only ship at a faster cadence, but add additional features, which was the thing that I was actually surprised, because testability also constructs a more adaptable architectures. You do, and I'm sure several people in the room already understand that how a bad architecture just dramatically increases the test costs because of the coverage problem. Go ahead to the next one, Alan. So number 3, so this is in reference to our data principle. One of the key mantras in modern testing is that, hey, we're in a modern world and we have access to lots and lots of data that we can use to identify key bottlenecks for the customer and key value adds for the customer. Now, one of the comments is, hey, our software is on premise and hidden behind a firewall. We could never get usage data. So yes, I will agree that that does make things more challenging, but never is a strong word. There are several techniques that I'm very much aware of that people use today. Number 1, if you have a broad base, you can ship to early adopters with a regular cadence, and you make one of your conditions to the early adopters that the telemetry stack is on, right? Early adopters will love this because early adopters like to get their hold on new software because they will view it as a value add versus their competition, and also gives them an opportunity to influence features directly. The next one is with social media today and with analytics and Google Analytics, and I don't know if you've heard AutoML and Bert and Ernie. There's a lot of tools out there that can extract useful, actionable information from social media. But the very last, and this is my favorite idea of all, is one of the things that you can do is turn the product telemetry of your product, sorry, that's redundant, into a customer value add. So for example, if you take that telemetry and you add a checkbox to your on-prem thing and then say, hey, click this button and we will send the data to our service where there'll be additional value adds for you. That gets through the firewall and enables you to not only get the data, but build additional features for the customer, depending on of course, what data you're doing. Like, for example, Alan, he spends a lot of time on APIs. Well, there is a lot of information that can be used in terms of customer APIs. For example, if a API is changing its schema or an API is being deprecated, it is very easy then to inform the customer back. Or you could even say, hey, we've seen your API pattern. If you call with this parameter instead of the one you're used to, you should see a huge order of magnitude increase. So yes, agree. It's hard, but it is far from never.
Yes, that's the big point there. They're not absolutes here. I think that was English. I literally heard this one yesterday as well. Developers don't have the testing QA mindset. So in order to answer this, we have to know what the testing QA mindset is and why there are only some people that can have this and why they only end up in test roles. And you kind of see why when I ask questions like this, that this statement is probably BS. Some people are better at testing than others. It doesn't mean those people aren't developers or testers. A lot of this QA mindset, and I've talked about this a lot. I've had people for decades ask me, what is this QA mindset? How do we find these people? And it mostly comes down to critical thinking and systems thinking. Can you figure out what's going on and can you see how the pieces fit together? To think that this is something that is only mastered by people in one profession is a little short-sighted and maybe even a little egotistical. I have been in my last several jobs, I have been a coach for teams of 100-ish developers. In fact, I kind of ended up there again. And what I've found is that I've been able to teach those people how to test those developers pretty well. They think of the brand new tester that you are or that you've met or the brand new on your team. They might have some good tendencies. They might get stuck. They might not think of good ideas, but you give them some coaching, some guidance, some ideas, and they take off. I took part of one of my teams several years ago, my development teams. And when I act as a coach for a development team, I treat all the managers, the development managers, as my test managers. And so I still wear a test manager hat. I just don't have the role. I treat the dev leads as my test leads, and I give them the same coaching that I would give test leads and test managers years ago. And what I found is they can do some fantastic things. I took one of those teams and said, let's take a couple hours and let's see what we can find. And we talked a little bit about ilities, etc. And they found security bugs and performance bugs that I don't know if any tester would have ever found. They talk about this. Anyway, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but they were fantastic. They can learn this. And they just need some practice. They can have, I don't think people become developers because they don't have critical thinking or systems thinking skills. I think that's short-sighted as well. I would say the proper phrasing of the statements, maybe developers don't get a chance to use their critical thinking and systems thinking enough. But we can definitely give them those opportunities.
Yeah, and the other phrase I've heard from this, so often I'll hear developers make the same statement. And that is really code for I don't want to test.
Yes.
Which is also code for I am happy to continue writing crap and continue to hold QA accountable for finding it. Which, based off of the other bits that we just talked about, is just woefully ineffective.
I'll talk about that more specifically in a later myth.
Okay,
but for now, tell us about this one.
Well, so piggybacking on devs don't want to test, this one said if I told devs they would be doing a lot of testing, we would never hire anyone. And I will say this is primarily because your dev teams have gotten used to others doing critical or system thinking on their behalf. Now, if you do view software development as a system, then and then given the studies that we talked about before, this train of thought is actually harmful to a business. The first thing I would recommend here is start revisiting your hiring practices. There are a ton of companies, both large and small, that do not have dedicated testers and are successful. So I don't really think that there is something special about yours in the case here. Now, there is some exception. QA departments are absolutely critical when there's a high degree of just what I call a catastrophic risk, right? Medical devices, aviation, those type of scenarios where you really, failing to solve the customer problem means someone dies, literally. We should make sure dev is still testing in that environment, but not in isolation. Now, the last thing that I have done, and I mentioned it just a second ago, so traditionally there's been a problem in QA. Schools still don't do a good job training people in this. So if devs can't hire someone that does test, right, this has been a problem in test for a long time. But what I have found, going back to revisiting your hiring practices, I have found that if you do hire testers into dev as developers, you may go slower. Every dev, just like every PM I've met is the next up and coming Steve Jobs. Every developer I've met is a 6-star out of 5. You're starting to hire people that have a bit more balance and are actually more capable. On every team that I've worked on directly, this is experiential. I have actually found that is actually makes a stronger team, and it's not that hard to take, say, someone who's familiar with automation and teach them how to code in a production coding environment. Now, that's not the case for all testers, but for those who have automation skills and still maintain the critical thinking, it's valuable. Go ahead, Alan.
Cool. And this builds on the last one, but worth calling out separately. And I also heard this yesterday. I could read the tweets out, but I'll protect the guilty. Developers don't have the objectivity to test well. And the paraphrased quote I heard, and yesterday wasn't the first time I've heard it. I've heard this 1,000 times, is developers can't test their own code. They love it too much. They won't find the bugs in it. And perhaps but no. But no is the answer. It's really just learning those same focusing, defocusing, systems thinking things that I talked about before. When I play the role as a developer, I can do a darn good job testing my own code. And maybe that's because I was a tester before, but I know a lot of developers who some through coaching from me, some on their own, have become really, really good at testing their own code. And not just at the unit level, that's not enough. At the integration, the API, the end-to-end level, thinking of all the edge cases and way things may go wrong, thinking of ways to optimize for performance, looking for security issues, finding everything. And what they can't find through testing, they make sure they have alerting and monitoring through data to help figure those things out. They care about quality. Care and quality are two sides of the same coin. I read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and that phrase has stuck with me ever since. Objectivity means they're unbiased, and the argument is they're biased that their code is correct. Most good developers I know, and again, I may take this stance because I came from testing, but I am scared to death when I deploy. Maybe not that bad. I'm nervous. I'm very nervous. So I test it. I don't want my code to fail. And all the good developers I know feel that way. They don't want to ship code that will fail in production or cause pain for customers. We care about that stuff. And in doing so, we're able to test it and understand where the risk is. And where we're stuck and where we're worried, we ask for more eyeballs on it. We ask for help testing it. The good developers I know, for a risky change or a change they're not 100% confident in, they will ask someone with more test experience to pair test it with them. And pair testing I highly recommend, because not only does it get more eyes on that, different eyes on that, but it helps those developers learn more testing ideas. I, for one, have no problem calling my baby ugly if it's ugly. So, and I am not unique in my experience. Plenty of developers, and most of the developers I work with, do have the objectivity to test their stuff well. I just haven't found this to be true. And of course, some of you out there say, well, it's true for me. And I'm saying that's fine. I'm telling you it's not universal truth, not by any means.
And I will add to that again, in the same book, TDD is actually shown to produce positive outcomes, and it's partially because it helps to counteract this objectivity phenomenon. Like if think of it, if we keep the baby metaphor alive, like if you are about to give birth to a baby, then thinking through, what are the criteria you'd like for your child helps. Now, it doesn't help in real life, obviously. But when it comes to tests or code as someone's baby, it definitely does. And then the shift towards accountability that is being proposed here, that helps us too. Right, one of the main reasons why dev hasn't the objectivity is because they haven't learned it, and it's because they haven't been accountable for it. But when you start to shift that, it becomes a lot easier, because guess what? Devs are critical thinkers too. Let's go to the next one. Our customers don't know what they want, so thinking they can evaluate quality is ludicrous. One of the more controversial principles we have is we state the customer not only can, but is the only one capable of evaluating the quality of the product. And that one is just very simple. We're very repetitive here right now. But the customers only cares about one thing. They care about whether or not you have saved them time in solving their problem. Their problem they have today, not the problem 5 months from now, today. 5 months from now, they'll have a new set of problems. And they are entirely indifferent to your business, your product, and your bugs. If they can't solve the problem with your stuff, they will go to a competitor. Now, customer retention, sure. Code correctness can be important to that. The evidence is showing that code correctness really improves your deployment cycles. So if you see that customers are starting to leave your product, yeah, you want to look at, okay, are we having a code correctness issue that's slowing us down and not us, or not enabling us to adapt quickly enough? The real problem here is the ability to shift to a more adaptable software lifecycle model. Let's move on. I think we're running out of time.
Never. Oops, that wasn't what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
We must have testers. We have to. And Brent mentioned this before, and I want to reiterate that our principle number 7 says you may get to a point where there's so much testing knowledge on the team that you don't need testers. We are not saying you don't need testers. We are saying is that in some cases, you may say, why do we have a dedicated testing specialist? It has to work that way. I've seen, and Brent and I have seen these firsthand when we were at Microsoft, teams do this the wrong way. They rip away the test team and say, well, I've seen this happen before in other companies, we'll make it work. If it happens at an organization, it's a sensible evolution. So what we're saying is it's not an absolute that testers are necessary. I had someone say, well, I work on enterprise software, so we have to have a test team. Brent, how many tests, does Microsoft make enterprise software?
Yes, we still do.
How many testers do you have at Microsoft?
It's now measured in about 100 or so.
Okay, just check.
Yep. Out of what, 70?
And absolutely, the testing mindset can reduce risk and cost, but that's not the sole reason for existence. And also remember that testing we're trying to mitigate risk in what we're giving to customers. We want to make sure that we can mitigate as much risk as possible, but remember that testing isn't the only way to mitigate risk. We can do monitoring and alerting in production. We can do for services, we could do safer deployments. We can do better code reviews. We can run linting tools. We have a lot of different mitigation approaches. Testing is one, and it's a really good one, but it's not our only choice. What can happen, and again, can happen, not a universal truth, is when you have a team full of test specialists, I've seen them over-index on mitigating risk via testing. Like, oh, we wrote 10 million test cases, and the software is still crap. And it slows down the team. It's just not an efficient way to make software that helps people.
And there's very little evidence that this is a true statement, right?
Yes.
As we see, what I would challenge, if you hold this belief, I would challenge you to use the actual data in your system and actually measure it. I do think far too long tests has stood on theory here.
Yeah, and to be clear, again, I'm not saying test teams are not needed, but I'm saying that there are people out there, nobody listening today, of course, who continuously justify their job by making statements like this. And it will slow you down, slow your team down, slow your career down, and hurt you in the long run. Focus on learning and growing and making the team better. And none of these myths we got today talked about our principle around continuous improvement, but it's such a better place to be from the test role. This is where you focus on helping the team accelerate the achievement of shippable quality. Look at the big picture. Sometimes, but not always, your testing is going to be what helps the team, but there are definitely more ways besides reducing risk and cost to provide value to your team.
Yeah. I find it interesting that we accidentally set these up so that they piggyback off of each other. Good job, Alan.
Oh, not accidentally. Everything I do is on purpose, my whole life.
Right. So our priority is informing the business business leaders can decide. We hear a lot that a test job is to provide information. I will state it differently. Test job used to be very critical responsibility used to be informing the business. In today's era, though, there's too much information. This needs to be prioritized and turned into opportunities in action. Now, here's where I see an opportunity here with the test community. In the past, what we observed, and again, I spent the majority of my career as a middle manager in test. And what I found is the person who I was supposed to be informing, making the decision, what you see is the difference between the words and the actions. And the words or the actions show, no. What they did is they hired me so that I would take care of the quote unquote test crap, because it wasn't important to the business leader for their decision, right? This leads to further siloing of test, and that's even stronger a problem in today's world, where we need the business to move needles and at scale. So here, what I would say is MT is proposing, or monotesting is proposing, that what we'd like you to do, piggybacking off of the last one, where there's a belief that test improves risk and cost. Well, measure it and then drive it down. Connect your work non-theoretically to what you're doing, and then start driving that as an action. In data science, we describe a difference between information and knowledge. And information is sort of objective, as, hey, we had 99 out of 100 test cases pass yesterday, okay? But that doesn't help the business decide a direction. What we're proposing is connecting the dots and then using that critical thinking and customer empathy skills that are already innate in QA and start working towards a more valuable direction in today's era. All right, I'm done there, Alan.
And number 10, although I didn't leave as much time for questions as I thought, I think I can stick around a little bit.
I can too.
Here's my favorite. I love the endorphin rush that my developer tester codependence loop provides. And maybe this was said tongue-in-cheek, but we've seen this. There's a video of me somewhere on the internet of me giving a talk talking about this dependency. And it's me playing a game of air ping pong where I say, here's my code. And the tester hits the ping pong ball back and says, I found a bug. The developer says, thank you, here's more code. And they said, I found another. And it goes back and forth over this wall. And it's horribly inefficient and only funny because it's true. This codependency, and it really is codependency of, here's my code, please find my bugs. And as a tester, here, I found some bugs. I feel validated now because now I did my job. My job is finding bugs. And developer says, thank you for finding the bugs of my code. Now it's better. Here's some more code. And it loops and it loops. And yes, I'm being a little over dramatic and facetious, but it's this idea that it's okay. Like someone in the Slack channel brought up the idea of writing and editing, which there is a parallel there. But I see editing to writing as more of code review to coding. This idea that I would write just crap, that I would write a book with no plot and nothing, and bad descriptions and no flow and nothing interesting, and say, please edit this until it's good, is ridiculous, right? My metaphor went way out there, but we can't be inefficient. It takes too long. It wastes time. I personally abhor inefficiency. And thank you, Susan. Thank you for not being mad at me for signaling you out. But yeah, thank you. And that's, anyway, get rid of that. It's not a codependent relationship. It's a coaching and assisting relationship. I like the idea at Atlassian they call QA quality assistants. I think that's a good use of a QA team, or good title and a good focus for mission. Google for a while had productivity engineers instead of testers. Again, I think it's a good way to describe the role and what testers and QA can do for a team.
I do think, I don't want to neglect the point that having a strong relationship with dev and test is and will always be important. But what the biggest problem with codependency loops is that you can forget about the customer and spend more of your time focused on how can I outthink my developer versus focus on what the business cares about, and that's how to serve your customer better.
Booyah. All right. I was parallel answering some questions in the Slack channel, and I will stay there and answer more. But some links for you. And thank you for sticking out and hanging out. And thanks, Joel, for inviting us to be here. And I can stick around a little bit for more questions if you'd like.
I can as well.
Guys, I think that we will actually need to move it to the Slack channel. So sorry for that. You know that there's little in life that I enjoy more than hearing you guys actually rant about modern testing lately. So
you don't have to apologize, Joel. And the good news is Brent and I are both much less long-winded in our typing answers.
I would get that from Brent, but I know you enough.
Ouch. Ouch.
Yeah, you know, truth hurts, man. Sorry for that. Guys, I want to say that it was great. And I always say it. I hate you both because you make it hurt. You make it hurt personally as a tester. But on the other hand, if it doesn't hurt, it means that you're not growing. So you bring quite a lot of points. And at the end of the day, it's actually making those decisions and thinking about it is what is going to help us to grow better and to become better over time.
Here's the term I use, Joel. I think you're a parent, right? It is love. Alan and I love this discipline, but it is tough love.
Okay, now I feel like my 12-year-old son with whom I had a very interesting discussion this afternoon. Thanks a lot.
And one last quote comes to mind, then I'll let you go, is in addition to testing books, I read a lot of leadership books. And one of my favorites is a book called Leadership on the Line, and it's by Ronald Heffitz. And there's a quote from that book I'll use all the time, and I'll use it one last time here today, which is leadership, which is what this is disappointing people at a level they can absorb. And that's what we try and do.
So I really thank you both, I guess in the name of everyone who was listening. And guys, as always, just very happy that you could actually take the time to be here today.